Frikkie Jonker is Irdeto's Broadcasting and Cybersecurity Anti-Piracy Director. He joins us for this episode of What's Next. Now, Frikkie is the Director of Broadcast Cybersecurity and Anti-Piracy at Irdeto, and he's been featured in many publications. His name's very familiar when it comes to work in combating piracy, such as the arrest of Peter Lombard for selling illegal streaming devices recently. Irdeto, owned by MultiChoice Group, is dedicated to fighting cybercrime in video entertainment. And there's also all sorts of facets to cybercrime, but the evolution of piracy in the digital age, the role of technology in combating piracy, and the impact of piracy on broadcasters and the creative industry, as well as the economic implications. That's what we're going to be covering in this episode of What's Next. Frikkie, great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Frikkie. Listen, it's an interesting career path that you've chosen. What drives you and your personal commitment to fighting piracy and protecting the creative industry? Was there a specific moment or experience that sparked your passion for this work? Because it's certainly very different to what other professions are out there. And how do you stay motivated to continue this important work through Partners Against Piracy?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's a very good introduction of who I am and, of the company and what we do. So in terms of what motivates me, it's just that when I see somebody is stealing something from our group company, MultiChoice Group, and use it to defraud people, use it to put people at risk. Because once you actually start buying these devices and you start paying online for these, recalled, credentials to get access to these servers, these pirate servers, or you buy a device that's configured in a way to view content illegally. Once you engage somebody with that, Aki, it means it's almost like you stand on your porch of your house and you open the door and you say, "Criminals, please come in." Because you actually expose yourself. And for me, as an ex-military person as well, in terms of, fighting piracy and combating piracy, there's so many words you can use. It just means for me in terms of that, I cannot stand for that. I mean, I cannot stand that people believe they're getting a good deal by actually viewing content on these different, platforms, cheaper or free or whatever the case might be. And for us just to stand idle by and let it just happen, we need to educate the people out there in terms of the dangers of this. And for me, it's always been, I come out of an enforcement background, so I've always been passionate about it. Many years ago, over 30 years ago, I left the Defense Force and I then joined, those days it was MNet. And those days when you say about the evolution, it was situations where people used to change a chip in the decoder, and people used to sell DVDs, with illegal content of ours that's on there. But as the evolution has grown, so has piracy as well. And where we were, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and where piracy is today, it's almost, I want to say to you, the biggest risk for us right now, for all content providers and for all people utilizing the internet to do business. We are exposed to something called internet streaming piracy. That is where people go, Aki, and they actually create a server in the cloud or a physical server, and it's almost like a MultiChoice type of situation where they actually advertised on social media platforms, on e-commerce sites. Listen, you can buy this device or you can access this site and you can get content for a price or for free. And then what people do then is that they will go and say, okay, let me try this. And so what happens is that, it is just becoming a snowball effect, if I can call it like that. So they start entertaining that and it goes further and it goes, it just becomes a very messy situation at the end of the day. So in terms of from an internet streaming piracy point of view, you can get credentials or you can get a device that you can buy to actually view the content. So a pirate would go and actually get content from all over the world, and he will actually then put it on this server. And as I said, from a MultiChoice point of view, so he will have a customer base in terms of by saying, okay, you actually paid for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and these are the channels. Whatever is on that server, that pirate server, you have got access then to that. So it's either via the internet, to a device like your mobile phone or whatever, or you can actually stream it to your television set, to a smart television, and you can view the content. So that is in terms of not only impacting just MultiChoice services. When I say the channels that's available on these pirate services, Aki, it is between sometimes 500 and 1,500. And it's from pornography, child pornography, it's hardcore porn. It is ugly things that you find on this. And what happens is that you actually allow that then to come into your family. So what I sometimes do, 99.9% is to talk to fathers, talk to mothers, and say, would you allow this in your house? I did a presentation once in Kenya, and when I showed them the content available on these pirate services, one woman actually got up and started crying, and she just ran off. And after 2 hours, she came back, and I said to her, are you okay? She says, no. I knew that my husband had bought one of these services, and I've got 3 children, teenagers, and I went and plugged it out, and I phoned him, and I went to his office, because then she realized the dangers of that, Aki. So in terms of just, for me as Frikkie, we had many years ago at MultiChoice, I'm just telling you a quick story. We had a situation where they said, Frikkie, we're going to give you a professional coach to take you from where you are right now to the next level of where you want to go. And we had our first coffee there at the Supersport offices in Randburg, had a nice coffee, and the guy sat down and he said, Frikkie, tell me about yourself. And I spoke and stuff. He says, Frikkie, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? I said, doing exactly what I'm doing right now. He says, okay, I understand. He says, but where do you see yourself in 10 years then from now? And I continued saying to him, I will do what I'm doing now until the day I die. And he said to me, but Frikkie, why? What you asked me as well, Aki, Frikkie, why do you do this? The situation for me is that, yes, I've got qualifications. We've all got qualifications in life. But the biggest university for me that I belong to and that I'm a keen student of is the University of Piracy. Because what happens at that university, Aki, is that if you think today you know what pirates are doing and you only work on that, you've lost the battle. You've lost the actual battle in fighting piracy. Fighting piracy is evolving daily. Like you and I have a discussion now on piracy, so pirates will hear what I'm saying as well now and what you are saying and say, guys, did you see what Frikkie and Aki were talking about? Now, what are we going to do now to counter that, what they are doing? So for me, the issue just is piracy. I'll have a job for always because I want to make it very clear, Aki, you will never rid anything of piracy. You cannot say to an industry, there will be never ever piracy. Piracy will always be there. But the difference is 5 years, 10 years ago, when pirates used to look behind them, they saw nobody. On the African continent today, I want to say to you, Aki, doesn't matter, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, wherever you want to talk about, when pirates looks behind them, they see the police, they see the copyright enforcement agencies, they see MultiChoice, they see, Microsoft, they see Partners Against Piracy, PUP, they see all of these people now that are actually coming together to fight the fight of broadcasting piracy on the African continent.
I mean, I remember the days of Napster, the same thing the music industry faced, right? And as
Exactly.
you say, it's a constant evolution that's always happening. And I guess that with the sophistication of the digital age and IP addresses and that sort of thing, you've perhaps got more tentacles and more clues to
Exactly.
finding these guys. What specific benefits and synergies has the partnership between Partners Against Piracy and MultiChoice brought to the fight against piracy? And how has MultiChoice's expertise and resources contributed to Partners Against Piracy's effort to protect the creative industry?
Very good question. I'm going to answer it to you in the following manner. So if you look, for example, at Microsoft, and I used to work for Microsoft many years ago, head up piracy for Africa. So what Microsoft does is that when Microsoft many years ago decided that, if we go into a raid operation, when we identify a company utilizing software illegally, and we go in there and we only find Microsoft software that is counterfeit, illegal software, unlicensed software in that environment, it is only one element of the software industry that you addressed. And that is where they actually created the BSA, the Business Software Alliance, where all the software creators came together and say, let's create an enforcement body called the Business Software Alliance. And so there's for the movie industry as well, the Motion Picture Association. And for the music industry, there's also an association as well that governs that as well. In terms of that, so when you go into raiding an operation, then Aki, it is not that you just raid, and it's just your titles there. It is just Microsoft software. It is just Disney, illegal software or illegal movies that you find there. But you go in and the raid is more holistically. So you can almost like take everything down and address then multiple illegal copies of the software, for example, in a Microsoft scenario. So that is what we have done in the past. We have been extremely, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but forthcoming in terms of raiding, arresting, infiltrating pirate operations, utilizing our technology that we have within Irdeto to identify accounts being utilized illegally and all of those things. So what we've realized, and what I've realized in 2019, I believe, is that, to start actually talking to like-minded people within MultiChoice Group and say, let's work together and create an organization where the music industry, the software industry, the actual governments and industries, can actually join, and other also very, very important local sports people, local artists, the creative industry in African countries to join us. And that's what we've done. We've really since then have actually opened up offices in so many, or chapters in so many countries. And it actually helps us that when we go into a raiding situation, it is not just always MultiChoice standing on the mountaintops and shout piracy, piracy, but now it's a collaborative voice. It is actually addressing the local artists, local sports musicians, everybody that's impacting in that country is also feeling, whoa, my interests are also being protected right now. So when we actually go in to do a raid then, it's not just we're looking just for our content then. We're looking also for the local artist content in as well, and actually protect that content then when we go forward. And also when you go and you lobby for new legislation, it's one thing when a company, an individual company says, Ministry of, for example, the Attorney General's office, listen, we need to ask you to amend some laws because this is the new law. This is a new type of piracy. Please help us. But if you do that, yes, they will help you. Obviously, they will help you, but it could probably take time. But when you go in there as an industry-focused, lobbying group, and you go in there with all these relevant people actually going to government and say, this is how it impacts us. Attorney General, this is how it impacts us as well. And everybody comes in and they sit back and they go like, wow, you know what? We didn't know that so many people are impacted by this. And obviously they look at it then differently. And I can tell you something, in a lot of African countries already, we've seen the benefit of that. If you look in terms of the Ministry of Justice in South Africa, the MOU we signed with them as well, in terms of, we just want to obviously settle now everything with the new government, of unity that's in place right now. But once that is in place, again, we're going to pick up where we left off with the previous minister and the Department of Justice, doing training, and not just us doing the training. All these relevant parties that I've mentioned as well will come together and do training, look at the different laws that there are and try to change those laws to effectively address the actual piracy as it is today. Because I always used to say to people, when I was in the software industry, when you buy a piece of equipment, today, when you buy a computer today, how long is that computer going to stay, latest technology? It's 48 hours. So what we are trying to do is not to get 48 hours relevance, but just to say, is let's change the laws in terms of what's on the ground today, because things have changed a lot.
Frikkie, what specific strategies has Partners Against Piracy developed to combat the rising threat of digital piracy? We mentioned, and you spoke about the sophistication of these pirates today, and how does it stay ahead of pirate tactics? Because let's be honest, with the cloud and everything, the game has changed.
So in terms of what's the actual significance of PUP is that PUP is not in terms of, people working for PUP, there's an office or whatever, it's an association. So what happens that makes it so successful is that within PUP, their members bring their technologies to the forefront, bring their people, their time, their energy to the actual table in terms of combating piracy together. in a specific geographical area or a specific country on the African continent. So when we as MultiChoice Group comes, to the forefront, we bring a lot of technology to the table that we actually utilize, and it's all open source. So it's not issues that we do and go and get information, on the dark web or things like that. It's all open source information that we get. And once we identify a pirate operation, there's certain things that we do. We actually then do the test purchases. We actually subscribe. We investigate. We infiltrate the pirate network. We collect as much as evidence as we can. We then deploy certain, technologies within MultiChoice to identify the accounts, how they actually obtain the accounts, and we do all of that together, and then we put it into a report. We take the devices that we've purchased. We do technical analysis on that, by companies that's being approved by the relevant enforcement agencies in Africa to say if this company analyze a pirate device, they'll accept the report. And then what we do is we go to the police then, and we actually file a criminal complaint and a case against an individual. So 99.9% of our cases, as PUP, as MultiChoice, whatever the case might be, and other rights holders as well, is actual criminal cases. Yes, there are certain areas where we go in civil litigation where you can say, listen, we suffered severe losses because of this, and then we actually can file that as well. But the majority of the cases is criminal, because what we are working here with, and I haven't mentioned that before, is we're working with sophisticated criminal organizations, criminal syndicates that is involved in this. So in terms of, I always say to somebody, a very simplistic way is that when you look at a syndicate, they've got various legs that they stand on. One of the legs these days that syndicates are operating on is definitely making money out of streaming piracy. So when I say to you, there are people like me that, that does this for a living, but to counter what I do in the piracy environment, they are there. So that every time that, that we do something to identify accounts or identify individuals, they will go and sit like you and I today, and they'll go like, so what did MultiChoice Group did right? What did the members of PUB do now to actually take our business and throw it, into the water as well? And then what they will do is they will come up there and say, this is how we're going to counter them. And that's what I said to you when I came back with the University of Piracy. In terms of that is what makes me so excited. In terms of that, it doesn't mean that if somebody pirates our content in this format, it's going to stay for the next 20 years. It will stay. We'll identify. We will work out the necessary countermeasures. We will counter what they do, and then we'll wait for them to respond. Sometimes, to be quite frank with you, it could be minutes that takes them to respond. Sometimes, it takes sometimes months or years for them to say how do they react and what they can do. But the level of piracy on the African continent pertaining to streaming piracy, it varies. This month it will be high. It's also season driven. So when the EPL league starts right now again, piracy will be rife and everybody will look again how they can get that. But what is excellent for me in terms of coming back to PUB is that so the Music Society has certain ways that they address piracy. Artists, the police, everybody, and we take all of that and we put it together into one pot and say, how do we collectively address piracy then on the African continent?
And Frikkie, what specific technological advances has Irdeto and PUB developed? Because I know you guys have got your own stuff that you've developed to combat the rising threat of piracy in the digital landscape. And how do they stay ahead of pirate tactics?
I'm not trying to be evasive what I'm going to say to you right now by trying to answer you, not what you're asking me for. But I'm not going to mention to you, for example, a tool, a technology or anything that we use. Let me say it in this way to you. We have got technology that when we identify somebody utilizing our content, we can look at the content that they're utilizing on our platform, and I can identify which user or which account has been utilized for this. So we can identify. Then with open source, we can then take the details of that person and go and identify who this person is and put a whole actual profile around that person so that when we go to the police, and I'm not trying to be bullish what I'm saying to you right now, but when we go to police, they love us because we come in with a docket, we're coming in with a case file. And in that case file, we've done everything for them. They don't have to go and say, let's just test this, because we've done it in so many countries and so many jurisdictions already. So when we give them our actual report, they take the report and they say, come back in a week or so and we will action this for you. In some countries, if we early in the morning, by evening, we've done the raids with the police already. So there are a lot of technologies that we utilize to identify within Irdeto, technologies being developed within Irdeto. Give you one example, for example, is that when last year with the Rugby World Cup, not one of the pirate streams we've identified utilized SuperSport feeds for the pirates need to pirate that content. It was other content providers' content that was utilized. Because of the technology we had, we were able to identify the accounts in real time, and in real time switch them off immediately as well. To the point is that when we actually then monitored some of the pirate forums, is that the words that were used by people that subscribe to these pirate operations, it was quite vulgar, but it just came down to, you guys promised us we'll be able to view this. We paid you, and still, our channels were taken down. So in terms of that, again, as I said to you right now, we are busy developing, as I'm speaking to you right now, new technologies already, because the ones we have, I'm looking at it in terms of to say, this is what we're currently doing. But if I was a pirate, how would I circumvent that? And what will I bring out to make that obsolete? So it's not just that we are looking, what we have right now is addressing a piracy situation. We are looking and actually forward thinking by saying, if that gets broken, what do we need to do then to replace that? So it is not just by sitting still and wait for it to happen. We are proactively looking at new ways to actually fight piracy should any technology we have being circumvented by the pirates.
Very interesting. And how does the creative industry balance the need for robust copyright protection that you've been talking about with the risk of overly broad enforcement measures that might possibly even stifle innovation or harm legitimate customers for that matter?
So when we talk about technologies developed to identify pirate operations, never ever is it coming at the risk of actually impacting on legitimate subscribers. So let me just put that aside for you immediately. I think it was about 15, 20 years ago. You would look at a place like Kenya. You look at a place like Ghana. In terms of where the musicians were paupers, they were poor people, but their music was playing on top charts on the African continent. And there was a situation that we experienced once with the previous president in Kenya, where we were supposed to sign, it was in 2019, the new Copyright Act. And the president of Kenya at that stage was at his best friend's funeral. And his best friend was a musician. And that musician died as a poor man. Family members, friends, and people had to put money together to put that artist, into the ground to bury him. So the situation is in terms of that, when we look at the African continent, I can tell you right now, in terms of that, we cannot actually, I cannot say to you that we need to do even more than we're doing right now, because the more we do, the more benefit, it benefits the creative industry. We've done a clip one day, I don't know if you've seen it, it's talk about, piracy untells our story. Where you've taken, for example, we've just taken a broadcast of a sports event, and we've taken that and say, from a piracy point of view, who actually suffers as well when we actually, when piracy comes in and actually, take livelihoods away from, who are the people that suffers? And if you go down into it, people always will look at, MultiChoice. I mean, MultiChoice is a rich company. They're not going to feel anything or anything like this. Forget about MultiChoice. Put it on the sideline. Look at the people that supports us as MultiChoice to get local content onto the television set as a customer. You're talking about the script writers. You're talking about the person that came up with the idea. You're talking about people making clothes, the food when they make it during productions. It is huge in terms of the people that's involved in that. So it's not just only that, oh, don't worry, MultiChoice has got enough money. Bill Gates has got enough money. One more extra, counterfeit copy, software copy is not going to make. No, that's not the issue. That is not the issue. When we talk about the creative industry, the impact of piracy is so huge on them that in terms of if we don't do something about it, it's that they will suffer. And everybody in the pipeline, the ecosystem, suffers at the end of the day, please.
Has Partners Against Piracy done any kind of research, like economic research, to kind of quantify? Do we have a number on the impact of piracy on the creative industry and what the key findings and recommendations were? I imagine that it must cost this industry millions, if not billions.
Billions, definitely. So the good news I want to say to you is that, as we said earlier on, we're busy doing, as individual industries, we do certain things. We've just embarked now, on a big campaign where we're actually going to do a market survey, on the continent, where we're going to actually now do market survey in key markets to actually really also understand in terms of that, this is what we believe piracy, the impact is, but let's go down to the grassroots and really see, what impact it really has, in this whole ecosystem that we're talking about. And please, let's have a discussion again and ask me that question once that is done again. And then I can actually tell you in terms of, potentially the losses. But what I can say to you right now, if you just look in terms of, when we look in terms of how people access content illegally on the continent, and you look at, information that's available out there, not a lot of information is, as you rightfully point out, it is hundreds and millions of dollars and billions, of local currencies and local money that you actually lose because of that. Just to say to you one thing as well, I think what is important to understand is that, and this is what is so exciting for me as well, is that when PUP was born as well, it also assisted governments to show actually the world out there that the African continent is serious about protecting people's rights. And when you look from an investment point of view, then what happens is that when a person looks at a country and he wants to invest in that country, and he finds out that, from an intellectual enforcement, from an intellectual rights point of view, this country protects people's rights, they go like, hold on, this is a place where we can go and do business. So it is not just that we protect the current industry that is there, the actual people that are playing a role in that, but also what we do is to protect other people from coming into those markets as well and come and invest there as well. That's the role we say as well, because the more people come invest in the country, the better for us as Africans at the end of the day.
Can you share a specific case study of a successful collaboration between Partners Against Piracy members that led to a significant reduction in piracy? And what lessons have you learned from that experience? Where have you had good successes in this regard?
We had some very good successes, actually rightfully played out, in South Africa, with the police, the Hawks, and also serious commercial crime. We had huge successes in Nigeria with the Nigerian Copyright Commission and the Economic Financial Crimes Commission. We had a lot of success also in Ghana with the actual cybercrime police unit, where we raid a lot of these operations. We had also had a huge success as well in Kenya, and Kenya is almost like like a cherry on the cake for us in terms of, because they were the first country that really brought a new change in their laws to actually effectively address cyber piracy, in Kenya as well. Tanzania as well is busy changing their laws, but even though with the laws that are not right there, we're supposed to be, still Tanzania, Botswana, Namibia, name all the countries, South Africa, we still are able to work with the enforcement agencies to raid and arrest pirate operations. Again, there, as I said earlier on, once we have statistics, when we do these impact studies and we do these surveys, we'll be able to come up by saying, this is the percentage of piracy in the creative industry. And then from there, I can answer your question. We actually have this again in 6 months from now or 3 months from now in terms of, has it been decreased? Because now we're going to actually have a situation. This is what we currently do. This is where the percentage was pegged at. Now, 3 months later, has it actually gone down or has it actually increased? And that is where I'll be able to answer you more accurately at the end of the day, please. But let me say this to you. In terms of the impact, every time we do this and we go onto the social media networks and we see what we've done, has it had an impact? you can see people have changed. We've done some raids the other day in Botswana where people were openly selling pirate devices. We did it with the police. I think it was 17 raids we did in Botswana over the last 3 months. Now, when you go into all of these shops or outlets to go and buy the same, they will simply just say to you, sorry, we do not entertain this anymore. People were arrested and prosecuted. It's not worth our while anymore. And so from a success story, every time we do something, we do it through through PUP or through MultiChoice, where we go out there and say, this is what we have done to protect rights of rights holders in a specific market.
And I guess, Frikkie, it's also about education, educating
Hugely.
people out there that don't know. I was going to ask you about the strategies that Partners Against Piracy have developed to address this growing threat of social media platforms and online marketplaces, because sometimes it's blatant out there. These guys say, no, this is all legal, and, these places are facilitating piracy. People don't know the better. And I guess, how can the industry work with these platforms to reduce infringement? When you make people aware, interviews like this, I guess it all makes a big difference in the end.
I'm so glad you mentioned social media. So in terms of when you say industry partners within PUP, so I'm just going to talk to you about from an Irdeto point of view. So we, as Irdeto, work with General Entertainment, within MultiChoice Group. They are the creators of local content, in South Africa and in Africa as well. So what happens is that we are working on their behalf with social media platforms. Name it, Twitter, Telegram, all of them, Facebook, we work with them. From last year, April, to this year, April, listen to this very carefully. You're going to be very excited what I'm going to say to you right now. We've taken down over 44,000 illegal clips and posts. If we did not do that, do you know how many people would have viewed that content illegally? 1.1 billion people. So what I want to say to you, so when it comes to online piracy from a protection point of view, and we talk about social media piracy, we work daily, hourly, 24/7 with them. And I can say to you is that the percentage rate that I gave through to business last year was 99% success rate taking down infringing posts. And somebody said to me, Frikkie, why wasn't it 100%? I said, because by the time I did this, we were waiting for that other people to come back to have made it 100. So the issue just is that, and again, there was these, online or social media, platforms out there, and some of them like YouTube. You take your content, you upload it. It's called the YouTube Content ID tool, and it takes it down automatically. We've got crawlers. We've got people physically, going onto the sites and crawl for content, through crawlers, either through crawlers or physically doing it. So we are so proactively involved in that. The other side of it as well is e-commerce sites, eBay and all of these places. We also got a working relationship with them as well. So that if we pick up any of these devices on e-commerce sites, they take it down for us immediately. So in terms of from a communication point of view, so if you look at our internet site right now and you go to MultiChoice Group, you go on there, there's a PUP site on there as well. We've got a QR code. We've got a dedicated, hotline that you can phone. There's piracy at MultiChoice, and that's maybe the easiest one to remember is piracy at multichoice.co.za. That when you actually report piracy on there, we've got a ticketing system. It will come into a server. It will be designated to a specific person. That person will say, hold on, this is for Frikkie in Kenya. This is for that person in Nigeria. And, so we've got a whole system behind that as well. Marketing and PR, in terms of how we actually push out the messages out there. We're on radio, we're on social media, we're on clips, we're on carte blanche. Wherever we find a gap to talk about piracy, to educate people about piracy, we do that quite aggressively.
Now, all of these services, well, most of them, I guess, need high-speed internet connectivity, right? Because you're streaming that kind of content. What role do the internet service providers, the ISPs, have in this fight against piracy? And how do they get incentivized to take more effective action against pirate sites and services, especially in the light that a lot of this content, I imagine, is encrypted, right?
Okay, so maybe just in terms of, 99% is not encrypted. It's just that the person has got a server and you connect to it and then you can get it for free. So there is some encryption maybe, involved in that. But coming back from a speed point of view, so if you look at the African continent, I mean, we've got cables, undersea cables coming in east, west, I mean, in Southern Africa as well. And I mean, so speed is not an issue anymore in most of the African countries. So you've got actually quite fast speed. The cost previously was a huge factor in terms of people not actually doing this, because I mean, it was speed. I mean, was an issue. That is also not an issue anymore. Speed is not a problem anymore. I mean, in terms of you get very good speed from ISPs on the African continent. This is where I spoke about earlier on as well, bringing you back to where we talked about legislation. There are few countries on the African continent where an ISP is mandated by law to block infringing IPs or block infringing domains. Kenya is the only, and we've done it successfully with some of the biggest ISPs in Kenya, where we obtained court orders where we actually got them then to block infringing domains. We are working with other industry partners in other countries where the laws are not that successful yet, or not at the standard that you can force somebody, but where we're working with other industry partners where we will go to ISPs and say, please just on your DNS server, block these infringing IPs addresses. And we've already seen success on that as well, where they are starting to block as well infringing domains and IP addresses. And the money that they're making, obviously, it's self-explanatory. Yes. In terms of that, people want to watch the content. And so, only way to do that is to actually subscribe, to an ISP and pay what I need to pay to get it at the end of the day.
Well, Frikkie, I mean, that leads me to my next question. And you mentioned Kenya as a great example, and I'm glad you mentioned it because, you've got the ISPs, but one needs to also engage with governments, right? And policymakers and regulatory bodies. How does Partners Against Piracy engage with these governments and regulatory bodies to advocate for effective anti-piracy policies and legislation? And you mentioned Kenya as a success story, which is fantastic. We should have more of those Kenyan success stories going forward.
Exactly. And I mean, and there we can talk about, the Department of Justice in South Africa, also a success story. After, we showed them in terms of the challenges in South Africa, the impact it has, the risk to people, the risk to a country from a tax point of view, from a reputational point of view. They sat up and said, you know what? We are eager to sign this memorandum of understanding, and it's been done last year already. So now let's take hands together and actually go forward and look at laws. Let's look at the laws to be changed in South Africa. Let's look at the enforcement agencies, what training they need to get, the magistrates, the judges. Let's do all of that. And that's a success story for me in itself as well. And we work 100% with enforcement agencies, police, customs, immigrations. We work with the regulatory bodies. We work with, with all of these different parties within governments to support us in fighting this fight of piracy. In Nigeria as well, we had already had workshops with the Nigerian Copyright Commission, that's been led by an awesome person from a Director General point of view, Mr. John Hussain, in terms of where we actually went there and actually presented to the ISPs. There is a new law now. I mean, they've got an excellent law right now. So the law mandates us as the Nigerian Copyright Commission to do the following. Mr. ISP, be aware this can happen to you. Work with us rather than working against us. So, and other countries as well. I mean, in Tanzania, the law is just going to be changed there as well right now. So in terms of that, there are success stories out there. But when we fight this fight of piracy, it's not in isolation. It is with the governments. It's with all the regulatory departments in those governments. It's with all the enforcement agencies. It's getting all these industry partners under one umbrella of PUP and say, let's collectively then go and actually get the support we need from governments to fight this fight of piracy.
Frikkie, absolutely amazing chatting to you. I can feel your passion that you have for this. And as you said in the beginning,
thank you very much.
When you met that person, he says, where do you see in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? I can now see what you meant by that, and I can see what you're going to be doing in 5 years' time. It's this is running
Fantastic.
through your blood. Frikkie Jonker, who's Irdeto's broadcasting and cybersecurity anti-piracy director. Frikkie, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. We do appreciate your time.